Hello, so I wanted to introduce you to some ideas of modernism. It's an incredibly exciting, enriching period for the arts, for literature, for philosophy and for music. And I just want to draw on some of these aspects to really give you a sense of the extreme experimentation that was happening. So if you go to somebody like Abrams' Glossary of Literary Terms, you'll see him look to kind of pigeonhole modernism as a period and also sort of a set of literary techniques or philosophical techniques. So Abrams kind of looks at this kind of period 1880 to 1939. And that period kind of changes depending on which sort of critic you look at. Some people look earlier to Walt Whitman and his Leaves of Grass, important modernist American writer. Other people look to people like Joseph Conrad, for example, and his publication in 1899 of Heart of Darkness, which is really writing back to the slave trade. It's very, very important text, actually. It's very rich, very difficult narration to do with reliability as well. It's a really, really nice example. Other people in different arts might look to something like 1905, looking to Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. There's been a couple of TV programmes actually that have explored and dramatised Stravinsky's work, because the production of the Rite of Spring resulted in a riot actually at the Opera House. So incredible changes brought about by very different conditions at the end of the 19th century, thinking about rapid urbanisation and technological advancement, huge numbers of people moving from rural experience to the urban. And part of this is sort of charted in Romanticism. If you think about Blake's The Chimney Sweep, if you think about Wordsworth and looking at depictions of London Bridge, you can see the Romantics balking at this kind of urban experience. So you could have a look at that and start to think about what that must be like. So late 19th century writer such as George Gissing, looking at these kind of depictions of the city, sees this world as being like a spider's web, full of smog, or maybe even London as being hell on earth, and the subject then is held in hell in particular. So to give you an idea of kind of how different the musical style is, this is Schoenberg. Now Schoenberg is famously known for this kind of atonal music, and funnily enough this particular piece is perhaps more accessible to the modern listener. So let's just eavesdrop on a little bit of his music. Apologies, I could listen to this all day. It's a very different type of music to what had gone before, where you've got the sort of the sense of harmony in particular. And for those of you with the more attuned hearing, you might be able to hear here perhaps some early jazz kind of moves that are being sort of explored within this particular piece. Other examples, you might look, for example, to art. So this is Picasso's famous depiction of a group of nudes, and you can see with these women's faces that he's superimposing a more animalistic or mask-like appearance. And in particular, from about, I don't know, 1910 to 1920, you do have a lot of representations taken from African masks, interested in kind of primitive kind of depictions. These are not inviting female forms. This is not the soft flesh of the 19th century art and previously, which would invite the looker in. These women are confrontational. They're staring back at you with these strange, emboldened looks and very angular sort of body forms. They are looking rather than inviting touch, and this is a very deliberate play, I think, of the kind of unravelling of the still life, as well as having these kind of quite strange, sort of primitive, kind of mask-like appearances. So Picasso is very famous at this particular period for these kind of angular images, and it recalls another modernist writer, actually, I think, T.S. Eliot, in The Wasteland, when he talks about man being a heap of broken images in these different forms. So Eliot is a very important writer. Other writers of the period, such as James Joyce, Ulysses, enormous text based on a single day, rewriting and referring back to Homer's The Odyssey. So using very erudite, powerful cultural forms and underpinning that with this kind of idea of high cultural forms, underpinning it with the ideas of sort of popular culture, so the mundane, the everyday. And actually Leopold Bloom narrates part of this narrative from the toilet, so you know, some really interesting kind of ideas sort of being brought forward here. So when did this all happen? Well, various critics have looked at it in different ways, but actually some of the writers themselves were really consciously aware of this change, and you have a series of writers in the kind of 1910s who are writing manifestos, so new ways of thinking. So you might want to look at the Futurist Manifesto in particular. It's a very important manifesto. You might want to look at the Feminist Manifesto as well and see the ways in which these writers are deliberately challenging contemporary experience. For Virginia Woolf, she pinpointed the changes occurring in 1910 in an essay called Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Brown. Very useful way into the period, I think, that particular essay. Other people such as D.H. Lawrence pointing to 1915 as being a change when the world was shaken up and altered. Now there's a period of what's called high modernism, where you have this kind of focalisation of these concerns of fragmentation and alienation, and this tends to be pinpointed in 1922. In particular, you have the publication in that year of James Joyce's Ulysses and also T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land. So it would be quite nice actually just to have a little look at The Waste Land. It's a fascinating poem. Let me see if I can just have a little look in here. Very, very different kind of way of really drawing the kind of the reader in, and then kind of slapping them in the face a bit actually. You know, the rhyme scheme is very deliberately playful and difficult. There's a lovely line, let me just find it. Let me see if I can find it. This kind of notion of the unreal city that kind of floats in and out, which is so very important. Let me find that wonderful line about images. Here we go. Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images. This is taken as being a very important line, a very important modernist line. Yeats also kind of returns to these kind of ideas, these ideas of monstrosity, not being able to know oneself. You've got to remember as well, this is a period that's being affected by Freudian ideas of birth of psychoanalysis, that thinking about the self. You've also got an incredible monumental war, obviously 1914 to 1918 in Europe, which really is kind of affecting and changes people's perspectives in particular. I did just want to quickly have a look. So just having a little look in the library, got lots of resources for modernism. I think this, if you like what I've been saying about art and literature, then Jeff Wallace's Beginning Modernism, the Beginning Modernism series is so useful. You might also want to have a flick through something that is thinking about modernism from a literary perspective, or if you're interested in this kind of notion of the urban, you could look at something like this, the kind of cosmopolitan modernisms. There's lots of introductory guides to modernism as well, which are very, very handy. Some nice short introductions. This Cambridge introduction is available online through Literature Online, and this one as well as part of the introduction series is very, very handy. You might want to have a look at a very short introduction. That might be sort of a lovely sort of place to start. Other areas that you might want to think about are resource books that actually draw together lots of these different ideas. So having a look at searching for things like modernism readers, for example, will position theorists perhaps, but also look at some of those primary examples too. So apologies, this is an absolute whistle-stop tour of modernism. If you'd like anything clarified, or if you find that at some point you need to come back to these ideas, please do just drop me a line. I'd be really happy to talk.